Okay. Hello. Uh, my name is Dimitrios. I work at Spare Room. It's kind of a household name in the UK. It's a room and roommate finding website and apps. It's newer in the US, mainly in New York, so it's lesser known. I will talk to you about SQLAbstract. Um, we know why, when it is used. I won't touch the BIX class. If you're using it, you're not using SQLAbstract. Um, it's for developers sometimes allergic to SQL or the look of the mix of SQL and Perl. And it is quite convenient. You just pass in a Perl data structure and it gives you a safe output with bind variables. And you need to trust what is essentially a black box with producing the right query that you want. Personally, for complex things, I wouldn't trust something like that, and I don't really mind the look of SQL, so I'm not a user, but my team is. There are some issues with code generation. This is well known. It might be a bug, but there are also syntactic quirks that make it so that you don't always get what you expect. I copied just an example from the official pod, which has ambiguous syntax for historical reasons. And you expect an and, you get an or, and it's not the same thing. And even if the code is logically correct, if you've used MySQL with big queries and big data, you know that sometimes the way you structure your query can really affect the plan that the optimizer will produce. So you don't have control over that. But those are all well known and well discussed, and that's not what I wanted to talk to you about. Nobody talks about performance. I mean, as I said, I don't personally use it, but most of my team does. And in general, it shouldn't be an issue, the performance, because even if string manipulations are among they're basically the slowest class of the base Perl functions, they're still at least an order of magnitude faster than anything network I/O like a DB query is. So you shouldn't care. You should about how you produce your SQL query, just how fast it runs afterwards. And that's the theory. So I never told anyone not to use SQLAbstract before, and just to be careful with it, until we had like a bottleneck on, it's a very high volume website and there are millions of users and they're sending messages which we need to process and like clear for spam and things like that. So it does a batch processing of messages which needs to be fast, and it was hitting a bottleneck at peak hours, and I started profiling, and I got this. If you note, the SQLAbstract is creating my query in 217 milliseconds. That's 14 times slower than it takes for the query to execute and fetch. We were passing 3,000 message IDs. That was the primary key. So it was the batch, and it made the query very fast because indices. But SQLAbstract added like a quarter of a second to each user processed. And I found that inconceivable. And I actually know what the word means. And let's see how some alternatives do. This is SQL interp. It's much faster, but like I wouldn't call it fast. It's still like similar to the time it takes for the actual fetch and execute. SQL Maker is under a millisecond, which is quite nice. People think that the syntax is less pretty. So this is just doing it yourself, so under half a millisecond. So actually, SQL Maker was pretty close to this, which is quite good. I should note that the slow performance is not only on in, it's anything that produces a big string with SQLAbstract. It's just that we quite often use in with many keys, and that's where I hit the issue first. So the bigger the query, the slower it gets. And our developers still want to use it. So the lead who likes SQL Abstract just created a new module that adds alternative functions, simple select, simple insert, which use a different path for the common where conditions. They're re-implemented sanely. And if you use something we don't support, that it falls back to the SQL abstract. And so to end, let's have a look at one more performance comparison. Just a simple insert with five variables. And I will compare SQL Abstract, SQL Maker, SQL Abstract with a simple thing that we use, which goes to a different path, and this function here, which is a simple function you could whip up in a minute. And yeah, so SQL Abstract is inconceivable. Thank you. That's, I mean, I won't tell you what to do with the information. It's just there. Thank you.